ton of bells and whistles. It just had more shit that could, and did, break. A company is the same way. You want your company to be as simple as possible. You don't want it complicated. You want a bare bones, stripped down, but well-oiled machine. The reason is because you want to focus on making money, not on repairing things or putting out fires. And the fewer moving parts you have in your company, the less time you're going to spend fixing them. This means as few employees as possible, as few suppliers or vendors as possible, and as few vehicles, computers, and other physical assets as possible. Ideally, it would just be you and your laptop that would comprise the entirety of your company. Naturally, not all businesses or business models are conducive to this. If you are manufacturing, you need a factory and employees. If you are a restaurant, you need suppliers and vendors. But unless you absolutely need to make billions of dollars, or insist on going into manufacturing, one of the biggest benefits of self-employment is less headaches and simplicity. So when choosing a business to start, as well as how to structure your business, make every effort to get by with as little people and components as possible. It only means less headaches in the future. Avoid business partners. In all my years in banking, every partnership I saw consisted of a business partner who did all the work and provided all the money, while the other business partner merely loafed around and parasited off of the other. Do not take on business partners. They are the single largest risk to your business. Other business opportunities will arise. There's no other way to describe it, but as you go about managing your business, more and more opportunities to profit will arise. For example, when I taught dance classes, it became very apparent that I had a captive audience. It also became very apparent that none of my students would become the next Fred Astaire in my short, hour-long dance classes. So I decided to film instructional dance videos and charge $15 a pop. In one night alone, though sadly not the norm, I sold over $300 in DVDs. However, when I first started teaching dance classes, I never foresaw this particular opportunity for profit. The same thing will happen to you. Like climbing mountains, you will see your business as the sole single mountain in front of you to scale. But as you climb it and get to the top, you have additional vision and vantage points you previously didn't have. And because of this, you will be able to spot additional mountains and opportunities for profit. A buddy of mine aligns tires, but also founded a profitable side business to sell them as well. Another buddy is in lumber, but also founded a used pallet company. And of course there's me with my instructional dance videos. Whatever it is, your business is practically guaranteed to have more than one potential source of income. So keep a keen eye out and always be thinking of a way to leverage your current position into making more money. Location independence. One of the biggest mistakes beginning entrepreneurs make is one of pride and ego. They get an office they don't need. They do this because they want to feel like they're an entrepreneur and want to show off to other people. The irony, of course, is that if you're just starting out, you can't afford to lease an office you don't need, and you're likely hurting yourself and your chances of making your business successful in the long run. Instead, what you should be aiming for is location independence. I've made my office on the beach, and in a cigar lounge, and while sitting by a lake. With the advent of the internet, and with most work being able to be done from a laptop, why would you anchor yourself to an office, let alone pay for one, when your office views look like mine do, and change any day you want? Chapter 7. Girls. The single largest plurality of a man's life will be spent in the pursuit of girls. You will go to clubs to meet girls. You will go to parties to meet girls. You will spend hours on the internet flirting with girls. You will spend years in college and decades at work to attract girls. If you think about it, nearly all of your conscious time on this planet is either directly or indirectly spent on getting girls. While at first this may seem a bit pathetic, understand there is nothing wrong or pathetic about it, as you are psychologically hardwired and genetically programmed to want, desire, and pursue women. It's very natural, and truthfully, there's something wrong with you if you don't have this biological imperative, with the exception of gay men, duly noted. But because of this, women present an incredible risk. They are likely to be your greatest single source of happiness, just as they are the greatest single source of pain and misery. They will consume the greatest amount of your time and resources, an investment of which may never pay off. You see this risk play out in everyday life. The sad, cowardly nerd who never gets the courage to approach women and, consequently, lets their absence ruin his life. The reliable, stable family man, father of 3, happy as he can be, until she delivers the divorce papers. high school football captain or player who has a full scholarship and a bright future until he knocks up the wrong girl. Or the desperate middle-aged man who orders a mail-order bride until she leaves him once she gets her green card. The examples are endless, but you get the point. Women can be the single greatest blessing or curse in your life. Because of this, the topic of women, how to pursue them, how to be successful with them, and, above all else, how to do it effectively and economically, is arguably the most important part of this book. The problem is the sheer scope and breadth required to thoroughly address the topic of women. For millions of years, men have opined, theorized, and speculated about the nature of women and have still come up with nothing. And one lowly chapter, let alone 1,000 books on the topic, will fail in the same regard. However, instead of approaching the topic of women by attempting to address each and every one of their eccentricities with the corresponding advice or wisdom, which has never worked anyway, it is best to take a top-down approach about women, operating from a model or general theory, and from there fill in the specific details and advice. The economic model. Religious leaders will contest, psychologists will argue, feminists will scream, and your mother will disapprove. But the cold, hard truth is that the relationship between men and women is not explained through religion, psychology, politics, feminist theory, or your mother's time-tested wisdom, but rather economics. Specifically, supply and demand. Supply and demand for what? Supply and demand for sex. If you harken back to your high school economics class, you will remember that economics is all about people who supply a good and people who demand it. These suppliers and demanders meet in a market, negotiate and haggle, finally settling on an equilibrium price for said good, and then draw some funky charts. And in this particular market, it is women who are the suppliers of sex and men who are the demanders of sex. The question is, how do men pay for sex? And the answer is key, as well as a vital insight into the psychology of women. With attention. Attention is the currency all women crave. Women crave attention so much, one could argue it is actually the men who are the suppliers of attention, and sex is the currency that women pay for it with. But neither here nor there, it is generally assumed in psychosexual economic circles that women supply sex and men pay for it. However, it isn't simply just a matter of lavishing a woman with attention and she starts disrobing. If that were the case, any nerd could flood the captain of the cheerleading team with texts and notes and end up nailing her in the locker room during lunch hour. There is something else going on. Enter sexual market value. Sexual market value, or SMP, is the concept that one person is sexually more desirable than another. So if you have a handsome man who works as an investment banker, his sexual market value is higher than, say, a fat single mom on her third divorce. Keeping consistent with the economic model, your SMP is very much like your currency or cachet. If you are trading in US dollars, it is unlikely you would be trading with people in Venezuelan pesos. Conversely, people trading in gold are unlikely to trade with you. This puts the entirety of your romantic and sexual success with women in your ability to increase your sexual currency, or SMP. How this is done is very simple. Figure out what the opposite sex wants, and deliver. It is here our forefathers haven't completely wasted their time. For the most part, everyone knows what men want in women and what women want in men. Men want a woman who has big tits, a tight ass, long legs, long hair, youth, nobody else's children, isn't a financial or legal risk, and isn't batshit insane. Women want a man who has money, brute strength, security, charm, leadership, confidence, intelligence, who's a bit dangerous, and is a badass. The real issue is whether people are actually willing to invest the time and resources to achieve these qualities and traits, and therefore attract a mate. And if you look at the general population, most people aren't. The majority of Americans, both men and women, are fat, obese, lazy, unattractive, uninteresting, boring, mundane wastes of human protoplasm that inspire neither attraction nor desire from the opposite sex. They'd rather watch TV, stuff their faces, watch internet porn, read Harlequin romance novels, and come up with any excuse to avoid improving themselves. The result is a slothful population that lives their sexual and romantic lives vicariously through celebrities, the movies, and the internet. However, this is actually an opportunity for you. With such low and decreasing standards, you have very little competition. Matter of fact, if you can run just 3 miles without dying by the age of 35, you are already physically in the top 20% of men that age. The issue is whether you are willing to commit the effort and discipline to achieving the above traits. Some of these traits are actually easy to obtain over time. Others just plain suck and are going to be a chore for the rest of your life. Romantic lives vicariously through celebrities, the movies, and the internet. However, this is actually an opportunity for you. With such low and decreasing standards, you have very little competition. Matter of fact, if you can run just 3 miles without dying by the age of 35, you are already physically in the top 20% of men that age. The issue is whether you are willing to commit the effort and discipline to achieving the above traits. Some of these traits are actually easy to obtain over time. Others just plain suck and are going to be a chore for the rest of your life. And some just plain don't make any sense, especially to a younger man. But a review of the importance of each of them, as well as an explanation of why women think them as attractive, will hopefully not only explain why you should attain such traits, but provide the necessary incentive to achieve them. Money. Women do not so much like money as much as the financial and material security it provides. Remember, in the olden days, humans lived miserable existences where food and clothing were hard to come by and secure. And just like it is hardwired into a man's brain to work hard to secure his future, so too have millions of years of evolution hardwired this into women's brains. This does not mean that they are somehow cheap or shallow, but rather is merely how they biologically and Darwinistically are. Of course, many women will abuse a man for his money, but it is up to your guile and cleverness to determine this for yourself. Regardless, you need to at least be able to demonstrate you earn a good living and are a good provider in order to attract a woman. So prepare to hit the books or get a trade or start a business, because nothing repulses a woman more than an unemployed nerd living in his mother's basement. Brute strength. Revisiting their Darwinistic biological brain, women desire physically strong men. Not because there is anything inherently attractive about muscles, but because those muscles, in eons past, have protected women and their children from other men, hungry animals, and a whole horde of other threats. Once again, it is hardwired into their brains to find stronger, taller men attractive versus skinny, shorter men. While you can't do anything about your height, you can do something about your arms, and that is hit the gym. Unfortunately, lifting weights is by far the most mind-numbing, boring, painful chore you will ever have to endure in your life. However, you will be much more successful with women spending time at the gym than you will at the bar or nightclub. It is arguably the single best thing you can do to attract women. Just suck it up and accept that over the course of your life, you will have to spend thousands of hours on your new part-time job, lifting weights. Security. Akin to brute strength, you need to be able to demonstrate you can provide security for a woman. However, not just by being physically stronger than other men or making more money than other men, but by being willing to fight. This is why practicing martial arts or even owning a gun goes a long way in increasing female attraction to you. It shows you will be able to go to the mat for her and your would-be children to protect them. Dangerous/badass. Having a dangerous streak and being a bit of a badass proves you have gone to the mat in the past and have followed through on providing security. You occasionally get into a fight. You have a small, inconsequential criminal record. You display rage at times. Whatever it is, there is a bad, dark, sinister aspect of your past that shows you have thrown down and thrown a couple punches. The paradox, however, is that being a badass can land you in jail and seriously impair your financial future. Thankfully, just merely being dangerous does not. Ergo, hobbies like riding motorcycles, skydiving, hunting, martial arts, etc. are all legal, but still convince your little hindbrain that you do not fear danger and threats do not deter you. Also, though it does not mean you did anything dangerous, getting a tattoo for some reason convinces women you did. However you pull it off, being the bad boy or badass is somewhat of a balancing act. You want to display danger and criminality without actually putting yourself in danger or a jail cell. Competence and leadership. Women love a leader, not only for the security and financial reasons, but leaders are also usually the center of attention. And remember, women love attention. Therefore, if you are a leader in some capacity or another, a teacher, an entrepreneur, a rock star, a senator, etc., women will throw themselves at you so they too may bask in that glorious attention. Just look at Senator Dennis Kucinich and his girlfriend. But the single largest determining factor in whether or not you become a leader is whether you have competence, and women seek out competent men like a junkie does heroin. Sadly, confidence cannot be faked. It needs to be genuine. You need to have confidence in yourself and conviction in everything you do. There can be no hesitation on your part or fear of failure. You need to approach a girl at a bar who is nestled within a herd of her female demonstrating you can think quickly on your feet and observe things others can't, all of which merely parlays into more security, more safety, and more wealth for them. It's why the world's most interesting man has more women surrounding him than the big dumb jock who can throw a ball real good. Just like confidence, however, you cannot simply flip a switch and start being witty and charming. It will take time and maturity, but you can accelerate the process by reading philosophy, watching brilliant comedians like Victor Borge and Eddie Izzard, and studying the likes of Sean Connery, Cary Grant, and Walter Matthau. This isn't to say you will become James Bond by the age of 25, but you will certainly be more charming than your 20-something peers who fashion themselves after Will Ferrell and Seth Rogen. There are certainly more traits or characteristics one can aim for, but if you achieve all of the above, you will dramatically increase your SMV and therefore increase the quality of women you can attract. Of course, none of these traits are achievable without work and effort, or if they were, then nobody would stand out, be special, or even be considered hot. But understand that is the key to sexual and romantic success with women. It is because the aforementioned traits are so difficult to attain and require so much effort that very few men do these things and therefore enjoy success. It is up to your mental temerity, rigor, and constitution to suffer what others won't, stand out from the rest, and ensure you are more attractive than most other men. There is, however, one final and vital economic lesson, and that is one of desperation. Understand the law of supply. If you flood the market with something, it becomes worthless. This is why diamonds are valuable and dirt is not. There is nothing inherently valuable about diamonds, just as there is nothing inherently valuable about dirt. It is merely an issue of the supply of both. There are very few diamonds, but there is literally tons of dirt. Your attention is the same thing. If you flood women with attention, even if you have a high SMV, you will drive the value of your sexual currency and cachet down. Therefore, desperation is the single most damaging thing to your SMV. At first glance, this doesn't make sense. Logic would say that if you like a girl, you should approach her and lavish her with your high SMV attention and win her over. But understand, women do not operate by psychology or logic, but rather economics. If you lavish her your attention, no matter how high your SMV, you are simply flooding the market, undermining the value of your SMV, and will consequently scare her away. It is here you must learn the Dao of Steve. Based on a 2000 movie by the same name, the Dao of Steve is basically a what would Steve McQueen do philosophy. It is broken down to 3 steps or parts and helps explain precisely how you mete out attention and expend your SMV currency. 1. Absolve all interest. You cannot have an interest in a girl because if you do, she will be able to sense it and think she already has you in the bag. This will result in her trying to extract even more attention from you, which only puts you in a catch-22. If you absolve any interest in her, however, and merely hang out, you plant doubt in her mind. Doubt that will grow into fear that you may not find her attractive, making her more likely to go out with you. This doesn't mean you treat her poorly, but with indifference and aloofness. 2. Excel in her presence. Every man, no matter how nerdy or sad, has something they excel in. It could be chess, it could be auto mechanics, it could be being good with dogs. Whatever it is, you do that in front of her so she sees you have a skill, and thus a higher SMV. 3. Retreat. After demonstrating your value, you simply retreat. Again, following the law of supply, to make your time and attention more valuable, you mete out very little. You keep it scarce. This doesn't mean you never contact the girl again, but when you do, say a week after meeting her, that attention is so rare she will be much more likely to go on a date with you, as opposed to the guy texting her 4 times a day and sending flowers. In the end, you should have an idealistic scenario. You have worked out, kept yourself in shape, developed a devastatingly charming personality, some skills on the side, a good career, and the confidence to strategically deploy these assets at will to seduce the ladies. You are also following the Dao of Steve, limiting the amount of attention you dish out. In theory, it should all work out. Soon you'll have a portfolio of women to date at your beck and call, and perhaps 1 or 2 might make great candidates for marriage. But as you'll quickly find out, no matter how good your game is, no matter how ripped your muscles are, and no matter what your take-home pay is, it's precisely that. Theory. there's another side to the equation. Women. You can control yourself all you want. It is within your power to improve yourself, perfect yourself, lift weights, and do everything within your power to become a real-world incarnation of the world's most interesting man. But what you do not control is the other half of the formula, women. And it is here where the majority of your problems will lie. Understand, there have been some major changes in the past 50 years as it pertains to the relationship between men and women in the United States, as well as Western civilization. And where areas the previous economic model has held up to time well tested for the previous million years, sociological and political changes have occurred that now challenge this economic model. Specifically, the three major changes that have come about are feminism, the government replacing men, and the destruction of the division of labor between men and women. All three changes go against millions of years of genetic, biological programming, but worse, have corrupted modern-day Western women to the point where most of them are damaged goods. Naturally, such a damning accusation will receive criticism and critique. However, this accusation is not made lightly, as its ramifications and consequences overshadow the harshness of its condemnation. One must understand that the most important thing in life is the opposite sex. Not only is it what you are genetically programmed to enjoy, but they, women for men and men for women, are likely to be the primary source of happiness in your life. Feminism, the government, and the consequential destruction of the division of labor have destroyed both men for women and women for men, thereby denying the greatest gift life has to offer for both sexes. This will likely be the single largest source of grief in your life, as modern-day political fancies and fads will corrupt, brainwash, and ruin several generations of women. Making matters worse, any criticism, pointing out of, and mere observations of this will result in a scathing accusation of sexism, bigotry, misogyny, and hatred, preventing a solution to this problem. Have you ever been called shallow for expressing your preference for skinny women? Have you ever been lectured for not liking her fat friend? Has any woman ever set you up with an actual hot friend and not another affirmative action case? Sadly, it gets even worse than that, as being called shallow for not liking fat girls is the least of your concerns. Now, false rape charges, frivolous divorce, career destruction, and tricking men into getting women pregnant are the new landmines the modern-day man gets to negotiate on this increasingly hostile battlefield. Therefore, it is very important to know how these three major factors have changed men and women and the dynamics between them, thereby allowing you to develop more effective strategies, have more success with women, not to mention, cover your ass. Feminism. While much can be written about feminism, in a very general sense, it has gone from a political movement for the equal treatment of women to a radical movement hijacked by Marxists to transfer wealth to women. To this end, feminism and feminists have used whatever tactics and strategies, moral or not, they can to achieve this aim. Affirmative action, victimization, sexism, misogyny, redefining rape, redefining domestic violence, diversity, male privilege, fat acceptance, shaming language, etc. A nearly endless list of political phrases, terms, and propaganda has been concocted from whole cloth for the sole purpose of creating the reason and rationale to simply steal other people's money. However, such a dishonest movement requires a huge amount of disinformation, propaganda, and just outright lies to keep such a legal extortion racket going. Disinformation, propaganda, and lies that ruin the lives of both men and women. Lie number 1. She can have it all. The first and arguably most destructive lie, especially for young women, is the canard that she can have it all. Have it all meaning a career, an education, children, and a husband. While for a lucky few this can be a possibility, the sad truth is there just isn't enough time